Hi, this is Paul. Wanted to bring you a video today. I want to look at a social media post with you that caught my eye and my attention. And with social media, I'm sure you can relate along with me that you can end up spending an inordinate amount of time unplanned just scrolling through, being entertained or outraged or whatever. And I don't want to do that, but the good value, in my opinion, sometimes from some of these posts is that they can serve as a helpful entry point into bigger discussions. So especially when they get really spicy and people are going at each other in the comments over a hot button topic, it really reflects sometimes a flashpoint of culture, of worldview, and I'm super interested in that always. So I like to look at these not so that I can get my emotions all ramped up with nothing to do about it and in the virtual space and just go crazy, but to gain insight and to reflect on what's going on with people, what's behind what they're saying, what's unspoken but there if you keep thinking about it. So that's the purpose, and it's not meant to be unnecessarily controversial. Just, hey, here's controversy. It's a flashpoint. What does that tell us, or what can we use for reflection? So this is the post that I wanted to read to you, and I wanted to actually scroll through the comments and just see what's going on and then draw out some thoughts and ways to view this, what's going on here. Not so much focused on purely the topic, the main content, but sort of all the meta stuff that's going on top of that. Maybe both, we'll see. Anyway, so here's the post. It's the Abby Eckel, and she posts, "Don't let a man convince you that being a stay-at-home mom is your highest calling. Once you lose your own income, you lose power. Always keep your own stream of income, and don't let a man tell you otherwise. Men do not view the labor stay-at-home moms do as important or valuable. They will always believe that providing financially is more important than anything you'll do. Always. Even if they say it's not true. Just watch in the comments. They'll try and prove me wrong, saying what I said isn't true. They want a stay-at-home mom who isn't going to expect anything else from them except to go to work and bring in money. If you want to be a silent stay-at-home mom who can never ask for more from her husband, never bring your feelings and emotions to him about how you're drowning in doing it all and need more from him, then sure. But the second you ask for more participation, the second you ask for more involvement, you'll be hit with the inevitable retort. They think being a stay-at-home mom is doing some dishes, making kids mac and cheese, and watching TV all day. That's the labor they believe goes into being a stay-at-home mom. Don't be fooled. Never, ever give up your own income." All right, then she's got her hashtags. So that's a pretty broad statement and a warning to women, and take it for however you take it, but it is what it is. So, and she puts a follow-on comment, maybe on Twitter, X, whatever. "And the same men that say they want their wives to be a stay-at-home mom are the same ones who will throw it back in her face for being lazy." Okay, so the comments get controversial and back and forth really, really quick. So somebody named Ellie posts, "Nope, not where I'm from. Stay-at-home moms are highly valued and respected around here." And then she edits, I think later after people are commenting on her comment. So she gets a lot of pushback, as you'll see. But she says, "Wow, there are a lot of hurt women in these comments. You're projecting your personal experiences. Just remember, your life will look different from someone else. I only shared the general attitude of my community. If it makes you upset that different communities value different things, maybe do some soul searching and ask yourself why." Okay, then Rachel comments on her, "As long as they're obedient, silent, have dinner on the table by 5. And Caitlin says, "Lol, if men highly valued being a stay-at-home parent highly, they'd do it themselves. Stop falling for the grift." And then Ellie comes back and she explains some of her reasoning, why she thinks it's good for women to be able to stay at home, particularly with babies, if they're breastfeeding, this sort of thing. And she says, "I'm only speaking for myself and my situation. I chose a great dad for my kids. Hopefully that is something everyone has in mind before they choose to commit their bodies to a man." And she says, "Never said it did," in response to somebody challenging her. "Like I said, where I'm from, stay-at-home mom are generally treated very well. If you don't believe it, I guess the only way to know would be to move here. I'd probably help I think she means it would probably help to have a fresh perspective of how others' lives are different from yours. All right, then someone takes Ellie to task. I chose a great dad for my kids. She's quoting her. This is a terrible sentiment that furthers the aims of abusers and attempts to put the responsibility for their abuses on their victims. Regardless of the rest, I hope that you do some research into how people get drawn into such relationships of all stripes, not just marriage, including the fact that many abusers look amazing until they don't and are adept at that, and reconsider your point of view, which is deeply misinformed and a part of why so many who are abused do not speak out, escape, etc. Only abusers are responsible for abuse. End, period, of, period. I guess that means end of discussion or end of sentence or something. And then she continues on her thought. Only abusers are responsible for abuse. End, period, of, period. If you don't understand that, act to that, and choose to go to victims, you are part of the problem. And you are yourself an abusive personality. Have the day you deserve. Cheers. All right, then Ellie responds saying, I wouldn't call anyone a lost cause. My respect for someone isn't based on how they respond. You accuse me of shaming, but then go right ahead and shame me. And then she goes on. I'm going to skip most of this. This fact isn't shaming anyone talking about breastfeeding. It's simply a fact. It's pointless to shoot the messenger. It would be helpful for you to discern between someone simply sharing a fact and someone trying to shame, because you got it completely wrong here. All right, so I'll skip down a few. I'm just giving you a sense of how these go. People making various points on both sides. Ellie keeps saying that she feels like she's in a good, healthy marriage. Then this person, you're not ridiculous for having the partner you have, but you are naive to think that is the norm, even in families that from the outside seem that way. Women don't tend to open up about their not so great situations to women like you that seem to have it all perfect. They will just let you think things are good in their homes as well, rather than embarrassing themselves. So you can say you are valued, but you don't know about how valued the other women are in your area. I guarantee there are stay-at-homes in your area that are being financially controlled or emotionally abused, definitely not being respected or valued. Then Becky challenges again. Where is this magical utopia you keep insisting no one could possibly understand? All right. Pam Sampson makes a more nuanced argument, saying this is simply the experience of a lot of people. Then Paula jumps in. I agree 1,000%. This is not every man, not by a long shot. Then women feel shame for not wanting to be a stay-at-home mom. Women try to gaslight other women by saying it's not the case, but I have felt more judgment coming from other women from being a stay-at-home mom than anything else. I never heard this, what did you do with the $20 I gave you? Implying that's what the husband says, or anything along those lines. I'm sorry if that happened to you. I can honestly say that out of all the people I know who are stay-at-home mom or widowed or whatever, I've never seen or even heard of the stories everyone says on here happens. Not my parents or grandparents or friends' parents, not people I know personally who are widowed or divorced. It seems like a very jaded way to live. Okay, and then it just goes on and on. If I had infinite time and you had infinite attention, I would read you even more. Because this person, of course, gets challenged and also attacked and insulted as well. I don't know if she does specifically, but she gets challenged, and many other women, likewise to the few that we read, also speak up and say, this isn't my experience. This isn't necessarily this experience of the people I see close to me or in my community. And this isn't necessarily the experience I've had, generally speaking, of the people generationally in my family. But I would say without exception, or close to it, over and over and over, anybody who says this is challenged, and often challenged, saying that the original poster never said all men, never implied all men. And in fact, they say the person saying this about what their experience of actually being supported, that they should not say that on this post, because they are saying that that's the experience of all people, that all people are supported. And I think if you listen to and read those comments very consistently, the ones saying that are saying this is my experience, or that which I see close to me, familially or in the community. They're not saying, I didn't see a single one that said this is everybody's experience. However, the people on the other side of this argument, many of them, not all of them, regularly do say or imply that this is the overwhelming experience or the normative experience or the experience of most people. They very much chafe at anybody going against that narrative or saying that isn't what I see, that isn't my experience. And they give warnings, they give a lot of insults, honestly, quite directly, a lot of dismissals. And here's one of the interesting things is that all of them that I think that I read, if I got it straight, all of them seem to be by women. So the original poster she said, men do this, and always was used repeatedly. So, I mean, I find it interesting that so many people jump to the original poster's defense to say she never said everybody or all, or she's just giving a warning to some, and that might have been like the impulse behind the post. I don't mind granting that, but clearly the wording, the tone of it was, this is the overwhelming reality, this is the norm, and using just men as a blanket statement and always, always, always is pretty clear in what the tone is. And then to accuse the people saying, well, that isn't all the experience, is saying, you guys are saying that's everybody has your experience when they're clearly not saying that. It's just very upside down. And as you read the comments, to my ears, my perception is there is what I would describe as a fair amount of lack of awareness and just blindness to what is and what isn't being said by people on both sides of the discussion or the argument. And you know, that's interesting in and of itself. The dynamics are very interesting. I mean, the women who say, this isn't my experience, or I don't know that this is a great statement because it goes too far or too generalizes bad experiences to what seems like all men or almost all men. They are regularly insulted by other women. They are regularly dismissed and insulted. I mean, really, really harsh and angry, maybe vindictive. I mean, you can't always tell in the comments, but it's what seems to come across just over and over in the tone of the comments. And there's more that we didn't read where somebody says, I'm raising my sons to be the best men they can be, and then they immediately get attacked and saying your sons are probably manipulative narcissists. And I mean, these so far, I think all the examples I'm thinking of are all women. So this whole narrative is nested in, of course, a belief, right or wrong, a stereotype that men are, abusive, they abuse power, they are overly aggressive. These are general stereotypes within this specific marriage power dynamics conversation I think takes place. So I'm broadening to what the broader stereotypes are. I realize that. But these would be the stereotypes that this narrative fits well within. Men are not good listeners. They're not nourishing and nurturing. They overpower women. They bully women. They abuse women. And I think all of these are valid points. I think this is true. Like, this is a dynamic that exists. So I'll touch more on that later. But just to first acknowledge, like, I think that's a valid thing to say, that goes on, that's a dynamic. But within these comments themselves, I think it's fair to ask, well, what's actually going on here? Because it's easy to say, I think this is what's happening out there in the broader world, and I'm going to generalize to what I think going on with everybody, and this is the main narrative, and if you think what is happening with you is different, then, well, sorry, you're a tiny percentage, and I know this because I know, and maybe here's my statistics, or here's my rationale, or whatever. But look at these comments themselves as evidence. Would it be fair to say that the women in this comment section who have this view, they're good listeners? They're compassionate and nurturing and nourishing to women. I know that they would claim they are because they're trying to protect women from potential abuse. And I don't doubt that motive. I don't doubt that they do want to do that. But just, are they listening? Are they hesitant to use bullying? What power they have, what insults they can leverage, what dismissal, what would they be happy to shout somebody down? Do they shout people down? Do they insult them and intimidate them into silence? Is that a man thing? Well, you can argue whatever you want, but in these comments themselves, it's women doing these things. No, I know it's controversial to even ever point anything like this out. I don't think that it should be controversial. But what goes on here? I don't think any of the people making these harsh or bullying comments or shutdown comments would cop to bullying or overpowering or not being good listeners. They would find justification, like, here's the reason I'm doing this. It serves a greater good that I'm doing this, that I'm being this hard or oppositional, or I don't want to hear this narrative, or I don't want this person to post this on this post. I don't want them to comment on this post. So here's my reasoning, and that's okay. I mean, everybody thinks they have a good reason for using great power, or for being sharp in tone, or not listening well, or coming back real hard against what somebody is saying. Everybody thinks that. Well, what happens is, and I think clearly, if in many of these instances, if a man had said some of these same things, it would be harder for that man to escape being judged as harsh and bullying, even having said the same thing, same words, same punctuation, same tone. Because there's, what happens is a bit of a cycle. So if there's this believed narrative that men are the bulliers, then when a man acts in a way consistent with bullying that could be interpreted that way, then it's very easy and quick to perceive it as such and to just put it under that label. Whereas a woman can say the same thing with the same tone, and if it's not already in the perceiver, that's the narrative, it's not as quickly or as readily put into that category. And it can be, well, she's the victim. She's a victim. She's a woman, so she's a victim. So she's just trying to protect other victims. So any sharpness, any stabs, any running through somebody or dismissing them or insulting their children or whatever, it's justified. Because this woman over here who's saying that, well, in her experience, men are supportive, the roles here are interesting, because men are for sure in the negative role in this case, and they are in the role of perpetrator, in the role of abuser, or narcissist, or manipulator, controller. And so if somebody speaks up on their behalf as a class, because as a class they're being painted a certain way, then that person is a collaborator. They're a collaborator with the perpetrator. And what is justified with abusers and their collaborators is sharpness, is jabbing back with a pointy stick. So if you have this narrative, then your bullying and violence is not really bullying and violence, because it can't fall under that label. It's defense of victims. It's defense of victims, which is always justified by nature, by definition. It's fighting Nazis, basically. And so in the public discourse and social media, I see this. I mean, you can see it as many times as you want in a given day. You can see it on hundreds of comments on hundreds of posts. So it's the same dynamic. This is just one small example, not even probably the most controversial, but there's a narrative that has gained a ton of traction. And this traces back to all the things I was thinking in the last couple of days on worldview and what's going on with us as a culture. Touches on religion, non-religion, all of the above. But that's a very simple, strong narrative. There are perpetrators. They can be identified with a particular subgroup, demographic, class of people. And the narrative is so simple and important that these are the perpetrators and this other class is the victim, that when the perpetrator says anything remotely oppositional to the narrative, it's just perceived as just another example of perpetration of abuse, of bullying or controlling. However, any bullying done by a member of the victim class or somebody representing that viewpoint, an ally, that actually can't be violence. That can't be perpetrating or bullying or aggressive, because it's inherently justified. So there's a cyclical nature to this. It's a closed system. It can't be opposed from the outside. It explains everything in very, very simple, clear terms. And all you have to do to be a good guy is to ally yourself with that very simple view. If you do, you are good by definition. If you don't, you are a perpetrator, a fascist, or whatever by definition, because all you're doing is at minimum collaborating with the enemy class, the enemy perpetrators. Very simple, very powerful. And I think if you look at what's going on in the comments section here, you see, I would look at it like this. It's like there's a shelf, bookshelf, and somebody's putting on the shelf a book. The book is titled Men Control and Abuse Women. So women, look out. And that book is on the shelf. And then someone comes along and says, you know what? Here's another book. Men also support and cherish and respect women. And I would like to also put this book on the shelf. Well, the people who put the first book on the shelf do not like that another book is being put on the shelf. And even if the people putting that second book on the shelf don't try to take down the first book and say, yes, that is a valid experience. That is a valid dynamic that is happening. The people who put the first book up are going to essentially demand that that be the only book that go on the shelf, because putting the second book on the shelf invalidates the power and the weight of the first book being on the shelf. So that's what's happening in the comment section, is that second book is being put on there. And I think if you look and just reflect the comments on what's going on, you could put another book on the shelf. And you could put that book on the shelf that says, the people who read the first book do not want there to be a second book on the shelf. And you could put another book on the shelf right there that says, the women that want there only to be the first book are very happy to insult, demean, belittle, oppose, bully the women who don't agree with them. And then you have to ask, like, is this really about loving and empowering women? I mean, that's the guise, that's the claim. But any women, it seems, who don't agree that the first book is A, valid, and B, should be the only book up there, it's fair game. Blast away. So I don't know that it's really that you love and empower women so much as you are devoted to this book. You're devoted to this narrative. That's your real motive and allegiance, at least potentially. The question is, do you really want there to only be one book, or do you want to be able to see all those books say, yes, this is a dynamic, this is a trend that's real, this is damaging, that men control and abuse women. And guess what? There's some other dynamics that are also very valid and very real, and you can see them right here. You don't have to conjecture or look somewhere else. You can just look right here at the people telling you what to think, and you'll see it. It's right in front of your face. That radar of bullying and control, it's like it goes on and off. I'm looking at this person with this view. Oh, radar off. Whatever they say is fair game, can't be bullying. Oh, I'm looking at this person that has this view, radar on. Now I can see it. Now I can label it. Now I can claim it. It can be really that simple. And I think it's not just something to get worked up about for the sake of entertainment or being outraged to no benefit, but these things really do reflect some of the deepest ways that we think and see the world. And it's not just theoretical. I don't believe it's not like if you're religious, then it applies to you, and if you're not religious, it doesn't apply to you, or vice versa. This just applies to everybody. And I have kids. I have a daughter, and does it give me pause to think, oh, there's a danger out there when she gets older one day of being allied or with a man who could be controlling or abusive? Yeah, I definitely recognize that as a real dynamic, and is something that I want to help prepare her for, just one of the realities within life. And I'm okay with other people being on that wavelength as well. So that's just to validate, like, the fear is there, the reality, the dynamic is there, it's real. And also, do I want her falling in with women like this on this post with their comments that have this very strong view, that are very happy to lay into people who disagree with them, who feel very supported, and I think that's a real dynamic at work in their families and their communities? You know what? I don't want her to be poisoned of what is real and possible and good by a tone that is just destructive in a different sense, but perhaps equally as destructive as being in a controlling relationship. I have a son. I certainly want to raise my son to not be controlling or manipulative or narcissist. I realize that's completely a possibility. Like, the people grow up to be that. So I do. But do I want to raise him in a world that only can see him as a perpetrator? Is it possible for him to even be in the role of victim? I'm not sure that's a good world for him to be in. And that is part of my motivation for thinking and talking about these things. It's easy to think, well, there's no harm for me broad brushing men, and then, people backing me up and saying I never broad brushed them to begin with. But the women speaking up seem to think, no, there's a problem with that. Like, I'm not okay with creating other victims just because there have been perpetrators in the past. I don't think that's a good way to cope. I know men and boys close to me in my life who've been abused or bullied by women. Off the top of my head, I can think of some examples. I don't necessarily ascribe that to toxic femininity. But was it bullying? Yes. If I already had this narrative in my head that this is just the way the world is and this is just the way women are, period, would it be easier for me to chalk those examples up under simply confirmation of that theory? I think it would be easier. would the evidence be stacked equally against men and women? I'm not sure about that. From what I can think of right now, it'd be stacked more against women. I don't think that's the case. I'm not even saying that. I don't even think that. But I'm just saying that the narrative that you put on, the lens you put on, is largely going to dictate what you allow in as evidence and what you block out as something to be dismissed or relativized or demeaned or contradicted. And that narrative is very, very powerful. I think if I was to take maybe a better lesson away from this post, it's the reality that is very sobering that, yes, the man you choose, the difference, I'm not putting the emphasis on the choice, I'm putting the emphasis on the man. The difference between a man doing what he's supposed to do and what he can do at the worst or the bottom is an enormous difference. It has a world of difference. So much so that the top is gloriously noble and the bottom is unimaginably bad and tragic. That's true. That's, I think, an unavoidable truth. I don't know that doesn't apply to women, though. I think it's probably, maybe it's not exactly the same, but maybe it is. The difference between great and not good is a very big difference. If you polled men, by the way, on, have you felt mistreated in any way or had bad experiences with women, you would get comments. So that's fine. Obviously, it's not a competition. I'm not trying to make it, that's a dumb competition in which everybody loses. I'm just saying if you have a very one-sided and asymmetrical view, it's very easy to simply continue to be blinded to the other half of the equation. I hope I'm not overstepping. I think very highly of women. I probably should say that. I think they're glorious. I don't think the things we read today represent the view of most of the women I interact with in my life, fortunately. But I do think it's a very appealing message to many and powerful, but not necessarily in a good way, but powerful and appealing, and seems to occupy the heart and mind of a very large percentage. I'm not saying the majority, but a very large percentage. And that way of thinking, where there's a permanent perpetrator class associated with a particular demographic, that's a little more general than just the men-women thing. But this is an example of it. It's really popular. It's gained a lot of traction. It's very powerful. It's very self-explanatory. It's very closed. It's very empowering to the people who cling to it. And it motivates things. I would say one of the things that motivates is a sense of superiority, the inability to listen well, a lack of self-awareness, a dismissal of violence, abuse, and bullying by yourself and by those with your same viewpoint on others as simply defense of the helpless and the victim class. That is bad. So I probably talked too much, but thank you for sticking with this and reading through the comments with me. And we'll see where it goes from here for the next one. Thanks.